we agreed on the condition that we not waive hearsay within hearsay objections.
And additionally, this was a process. It was supposed to be a give and take. We went first, unfortunately, and stipulated as many things as we thought, in all probability, this court was going to let into evidence. At the point we were supposed to then start in on our stuff that we wanted in, we tried on 3 occasions to try to get stipulations. Each time it was narrow it, narrow it, narrow it. Not a single document, even those that we identified, did we ever get a stipulation on. So theirs, through our goodwill, were stipulated in, and they never reciprocated on any of ours, causing us to now have to put in by hand I don't know how many exhibits and waste everyone's time. That's our position. So if they're going to do that, I think it's a tactic. I believe firmly it was a tactic, and I'm not willing to allow that to go on.
Okay, well, again, we've talked about this multiple times. Ms. Crowells, I'll let you say what you've said before on this issue, and then
I don't have to repeat myself, Judge.
Okay. But can we just for the, and I know your assistants have done an incredible job at creating these 90, there's only 2 of the 5 carts of exhibits. And if we're going to have an exhibit that's many thousands of pages and then introduce 1 page, do you understand how difficult that is for the folks over in the clerk's office to have to try to keep up? So I understand that you all need to do what you need to do for your case, but let's also please be fair to the clerk's office who's trying to keep up with this ever-shifting, is it in, is it not in, can we agree, but it's only a couple pages out of something that's already been agreed to, but maybe it's not agreed to. It's just unclear and unfair.
Would it be possible, Judge, to mark this, use it, display it, and then give us the opportunity so the witness can comment on it, and then we will meet again. If we don't get it done before Tuesday morning, I will revisit all of the stipulations. And so that way the clerk would simply mark this 1 page for identification, and then we will give it a little while, and hopefully we won't bother the clerk too much.
Mr. Whitney and I have an agreement that for this witness, for both direct and cross-examination, that joint exhibits can be displayed and publicized. So if that's what they're looking to do, I don't have an objection at this point. It doesn't solve the court's problem.
I thought joint exhibits were agreed to and can come in, but
right.
Apparently that's not the case.
So we agree joint exhibits can come in. So anyhow.
So I want this resolved. I don't want to spend every single trial day having these conferences on things that you all should have resolved a month before trial. So we will admit only page 2019 in Exhibit 1001, but we're not going to do that on a going forward basis. If you're going to admit an exhibit, the exhibit's coming in. If not, it's not coming in. Okay. Now, I've only dealt with 1001-2019. What else do we agree on at this point?
I think we're down to 1 hearsay objection for this witness with Mr.
Well,
Homebound.
I'm asking what's coming in right now before we deal with what you don't agree to.
All right. Additionally, 2408-1675.
I think I already admitted that one.
All right. And I think you already admitted this as well. 2510, pages 001 to 004.
yes, 2501-001 through 004.
Yes, Your Honor. And Joint Exhibit 1073, pages 65 to 69.
No objection. Again, it's a larger exhibit that we're putting in as an excerpt from?
We're fine with that entire exhibit, 1073.
Okay, I'm going to receive the entirety of 1073 at this point.
And then the last from our side, there is an objection to this exhibit, which is 2408-0082.
2408-0082.
It's an email, Your Honor, from our next witness.
You should be able to put it up at this point.
Your Honor, we made a little configuration change.
Someone was messing with this panel up here, I can tell.
Essentially, in order for the live stream to be able to display the exhibits, we wired into there. So if you leave his on, he's going to hit his switch to turn mine on, and the stream is going to pick up the exhibits, not just the audio and video.
Okay, so who is driving, who is putting up the exhibits?
In my live room.
Okay. So I'm not going to...
Correct. I'm disconnected from counsel's table, and I'm connected there, and this is my published document.
Okay, so we're still using you or driving it, but it's going to come off of a feed.
Correct.
From a
I
different
have a
table.
line here, and he's just going to switch to a different channel, and I'm still going to run everything
Understood.
for us.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm looking at 2408- something,
0082, Your Honor.
0082.
Your Honor, we understand. Do you want a moment to review before I...
Okay, so this is from somebody from the school board to Ms. Kowalski.
To Ms. Kowalski, yes, Your Honor. We understand the objection to be hearsay. We point out first that
Yeah.
2408-1675 was previously admitted, also from this witness to Mrs. Kowalski. We point out further with respect to the hearsay objection that this is a business record. Ms. Desert is the custodian of these records and will testify as such.
It's hearsay.
Well, it's clearly hearsay, it's just whether there's an exception for it.
Yeah, I don't believe that every single email sent by a public employee is automatically a business record. I think the only exception they've tried to admit it for is as a business record exception. It's just an email from a teacher to a parent.
Well, at this point, there's, if you're trying to demonstrate that it's a business record, the Israel test, I don't know if you're going to survive that test. So, I mean, you can try, but unless and until you're able to do that, it's hearsay without an exception.
Understood.
I mean, if you can prove it up, the Israel test, then you can get it in, but if not, it won't come in.
There's one other issue for the court that will tie into something.
Before you get there, the clerk wants to know on Exhibit 2696. 2696. What one was that? Is the 2696 the one that we watched in front of the jury, or is that a different video?
I don't have that number. There was a 2698 video.
This is what I want. On Tuesday, you all are going to come with a sheet of paper. Any exhibit that is agreed to, I want it in a section. Any exhibit number that is not agreed to, that you want to use, is going to be in a separate section. The clerk's going to get a copy, and I'm going to get a copy, so that I can follow along and we don't have all of these issues. So 2696. What specifically is that? someone needs to tell me what 2696 is.
I can tell you it's the video of them playing pool.
Is that the one that we played earlier in the day?
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Because we thought that was 2698. So someone put up 2696.
This is 2696, Your Honor.
This was not.
This is a different.
2696 was not shown to.
That's correct. 2698 is the one that was shown to the jury.
Okay. So 2696 is not in at this time.
That's correct.
Correct.
Any, Madam Clerk, anything else? Okay, Mr. Altenberg.
I'll be very brief, Your Honor. At least twice this morning, we've had witnesses already talking about the hospital taking custody or taking Maya. And as you know, I've told you I will be requesting special instructions on this. I don't want to resolve this now. I'm going to give you a 3-paragraph suggested special instruction that I've given to the other side as well. Realistically, I think the first 2 paragraphs are the most important to explain who took her into custody. My preference would be to try to resolve this and give this before the jury is released today, but you need to get going, so we shouldn't talk about it now.
So the plaintiff has seen this?
Yes.
Is this going to be a Mr. Elegant issue, or is this Mr.
Yes, Your
Whitney?
Honor. We were only presented it 3 minutes before Your Honor came in.
And of course, we strenuously object to this. It misstates the law, the evidence, and there's no place in the middle of the trial. And certainly there'll be a discussion at the end, but for now.
Well, I'm going to be inclined to give something relatively soon. Whether it's today, it's probably not going to be today. It might be on Tuesday. But we need to understand what is being tried. The jury needs to understand what's being tried and what is not being tried.
Yes, Judge. We
Okay.
have arguments, though, about...
You can have an argument, but what I'm saying is most likely I'm going to be giving something, so perhaps you could ask Mr. Elegant to work with Mr. Altenburn over the weekend on that particular issue so that on Tuesday morning we can either have an agreement knowing that I'm going to give something, or I'll have to make a ruling and each side can give me their version and I can read the one I go with.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I do have one last issue, Your Honor, before the witness testifies, just so we don't have to excuse the jury. The one medical record that was attempted to be admitted in is a social work note involving this next witness, Jackie Dietrich.
Wait a second, the one page of the thousands of pages that is in?
Correct, Your Honor. I'm happy to put it on the screen.
Yeah, can someone put it on the screen so I can...
It's 2019, it's 1001, 2019. And if you'll zoom in, and this is my concern, and it goes with what Mr. Altenburn just said. If you note in this note, it says, social worker escorted up to Jackie Dieter from Sarasota. Homebound teacher is well known to Maya. She and Diane and another teacher will be working with the patient until she's placed. Nurse asked that laptop not be left with the patient for fear of outside contacts. Teacher wants patient to Skype with her classmates. The concern we have, based especially when it went on this morning, is that the plaintiff is going to try to elicit testimony from this witness that the hospital made the decision that Maya couldn't have a laptop. The problem with this is there's an email of the same day from DCF to the hospital saying, quote, Maya is not allowed to have her laptop and phone kept there right now, as there's being info being shared from the mother who has been court-ordered no contact. So, again, we have a legitimate fear that the plaintiff is going to try to get testimony from the teacher. You try to leave Maya with a laptop. The hospital said no. We have no way to rebut that without getting in extraneous emails going on the same day. These are court orders that the hospital is following with regard to laptop use. So we would just ask that, that there not be an implication if they're going to talk to her about this, that this was the hospital precluding the laptop. It's all by order of DCF. And I have the documents to show you if you want me to publish the emails.
Why isn't that? Why can't the hospital, in its case, call a witness on that particular issue?
We could, right. I mean, I guess the cross-examination, as long as I have room to do it, is you're not aware whether the refusal for the laptop was pursuant to a DCF order. It just, again, it's bleeding the issues that we saw all morning with asking witnesses, visitations and things. All of this is being controlled by the court. And we are afraid, which is why Mr. Altenberg approached you about an instruction, that the plaintiff is trying to implicate denials of visitation, denials of laptops, of personal items to hospital decisions. And like I said, we have emails of the same day. It's DCF saying she can't have the laptop.
Well, Mr. Anderson?
Well, Your Honor, the fact is that the court order itself was relatively limited. And so what we have here is the hospital writing over to DCF and asking them to send an email back to them, telling them what they asked them to do. But the order itself says nothing about depriving this child of a laptop to learn. And in fact, the testimony will be that the state, there's a separate order, and DCF allowed this teacher in, and she will so testify, to teach Maya there, and that part of this learning was a special program on that laptop. So before we get into which order, I think first we need the testimony, and then the court can determine, once you hear all of the evidence, the steps to take. And that has been our position throughout this, is that for every one of these actions that we are talking about, you will see, and we will prove, that Johns Hopkins makes a decision. They call over to DCF and say, we think this is going on. DCF, you need to write them back. DCF, like robots, writes right back to the hospital and says, don't do this. And so if you compare those and then go back to the actual order issued by the court, it has nothing to do with it. In fact, it's diametrically opposed to their own internal rules and procedures at the hospital. So they're violating their own rules and procedures, and to get around that, they're going up to DCF. But none of this is pursuant to a court order.
At the end of the day, the court order says what the court order says. And obviously, I'm going to be instructing the jury that the parties were obligated to follow the court order. If it is something beyond the court order, then that's going to be fair game.
Okay. Understood.
Anything else?
Not for plaintiff.
Let's bring in the jury.
Yes, sir.
Juror, is that adjourned?
Hey, welcome everybody. Please be seated. Did you all have a good lunch?
Yes. Thank you.
I want to confirm, while you were away, you did not discuss this case amongst yourselves, you did no investigation, and you received no information. Is that all correct?
Correct.
Plaintiffs, your next witness, please.
Plaintiff's call, Ms. Jackie.
Clerk, and raise your hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do. I'm just going to come this way. That's there when I witness stand.
Good afternoon. Would you please state your name for the record?
Jackie Dietert.
And have you been called to testify today as Maya's gifted teacher?
Yes.
What grades did you instruct Maya in?
I taught Maya in 4th grade and in 5th.
Would you just give us the benefit of your background and education?
Okay, so I graduated from the University of South Florida. I have my bachelor's in education, and I have my master's in gifted. I teach the advanced 4 class at Taylor Ranch, right down the road.
How long have you taught at Taylor Ranch?
You're going to make me sound old. 1990. I know, I don't look like I've been teaching this.
I was doing the math, but I won't do that.
I started teaching at 12.
Is that the first and only school you've taught at in the Venice area?
Yes. Why leave the most awesome place in the world?
And how long have you been instructing gifted students at Taylor Ranch?
So I got my master's, I think the year 2011, maybe 12. I was trying to get it done before my son went to college. So almost right after that. I actually had taught them before that. I just had been certified gifted, and I wanted to know more about that kind of gifted brain. So I decided to go get my master's. I think I've been about 15, 16 years now working with just gifted kids.
And what was your master's in?
Gifted. Kids with bright intelligence.
All right. So Maya was entering the 4th grade in the fall of 2015, is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And how is it that students are accepted into the gifted program at Taylor Ranch?
So we're not a magnet school in the county. Pineview in Sarasota is the magnet school for kids qualified gifted. But if you don't want to go to that school, I would say about 1/3 of my class is gifted, and the other 2/3 are high achieving. Their data, their scores from previous years get them qualified in the class.
So did Maya test into your class?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the first time you would have met Maya, would that have been when the school year began in 2015?
Correct.
What was your impression of Maya when you first met her?
So when I first met Maya, she had come to my class in a wheelchair, and her parents brought her. And she was really excited to see the kids, real bubbly. You kind of wouldn't think she was in a wheelchair. She just acted and looked like a regular kid. And they just brought her in to introduce her to all the students. And she was real excited to be there.
And what about Jack? How did Jack strike you as a father?
Yeah, same thing. They were real excited that she could go to school, that they would just have a student pushing around or the teacher. Yeah, no, they were both very excited that she got in our program. Kids like to get in that program.
And same question for Beata. How did she strike you?
Mm-hmm. I kind of remember Beata kind of like looking at where would a wheelchair go? Where would she sit? I think if I recall, Jack was pushing her in, and Beata was kind of doing the, we split rooms, right? The 4th grade teacher and I share the kids. And so they were kind of looking around to where would Maya be so when she gets pushed in, she'll be comfortable. Yeah.
You mentioned the other teacher. Did you co-teach this?
Right. So I do the math and science for 4th grade, so I only see them for about an hour and a half. And then the 5th grade is my home room, and then my 5th graders go to the 4th grade gifted teacher for reading, language arts.
And so Maya comes to your class for the first time in a wheelchair. Was anything explained to you about her medical condition?
No, not really at the time, not from administration. I don't remember if Jack or Beata even said anything. We just thought she was a girl in a wheelchair.
Did Maya resemble her mother?
Yes. Yeah.
What about any commonalities you had with Beata? Were there any commonalities?
Well, I didn't realize it at the time, but a month or two later when we did Homebound, because I eventually ended up going into her home, I had a lot in common with Beata. She's Polish, and my grandparents immigrated from Poland. My grandmother lived with us. She reminded me a real lot of Beata. They're from Chicago, and we're from Chicago. I went to Catholic school when I was in Chicago, so yeah, I really related well with the Kowalski family.
And did there come a time that fall, you've mentioned it a couple times already, but this Homebound program, can you explain a little bit about that?
So initially, she wasn't homebound. She was probably in our class for maybe a month, and then the county had it wasn't Zoom back then. This was pre-COVID. Some type of a Skype program, and we had to get authorization for a video camera to be in our room. And so for a month we tried that. But then it was hard because sometimes she would have physical therapy and stuff, or when we were teaching math or science or reading, she'd have something else going on, or if she didn't feel good. So after a month of that, then the county decided to do Homebound, where we would go to her house and tutor her 3 to 4 hours a week, 2 hours in reading, language arts, 2 hours in math and science. And Mrs. Shepler and I split that, going to her home once a week after school and teaching her there.
So how often in the fall of 2015 were you in the Kowalski home?
Oh, a lot. At least once a week. At
And-
least.
And explain, if you could, Maya's mobility around the house at that time.
So, yeah, initially she'd get around with her wheelchair. And she would get, I would pick her up and put her onto like the bar stool. And sometimes she would like to do studies there. Sometimes it would be the kitchen table. Sometimes she'd like to be on the ground. I think just to stretch out her legs. But then after a while, she was always in her room. So I don't know how long I'd been there. I'm trying to think of like what the time frame was, maybe October, November. And then most of the time when I went there, went down the hall and turned to the left, she was in her room, laying in her bed, and I would tutor her in her bed.
In this October, November 2015 period, was she in pain? Did you observe her to be in pain?
Progressively, yes. Initially, I don't think so. But very quickly, progressively, a lot of pain. It got to a point where I was only seeing her in her bedroom, and sometimes she would like moan, like kind of hum. So I would kind of know when to take a break. And when I would say, do you want to get your drink? You want to get you something to eat? And sometimes we would take a break, and at some point we would just end the tutoring session.
And physically, I understand the moaning. How did she appear physically at this time?
At the end?
Early November
So
2015.
in the beginning, it feels so crazy to describe this, but like waist up, just great. And she was a real bubbly girl, a real girly girl. And, always had her nails done, liked to brush her hair. Always wanted, just real little girly girl. And then as she was getting sicker, especially when she was in her bed, like her eyes looked sunken in. They looked really gray. She kind of looked a little gray. Her legs were going in. She looked like a kid that wasn't going to make it.
This is, again, fall 2015, before the trip to Mexico. How was Jack when you were in the home tutoring Maya?
So Jack was the at-home dad, and he was just kind of like that person that hid any nervousness behind it. You'd never know. Jack was always positive. He was always making sure Kyle was taken care of and doing something, fishing or something. But he was just the epitome of the at-home dad, and he always had a super positive focus on what was going on or the kids. If he was worried, he would never talk to me about it until I walked out to my car. And when he would follow me is when I would know he would have something to maybe tell me. But up front and in front of the kids, it was always super positive. He loved being an at-home dad.
Was he welcoming? Was he offering you food?
Oh, 100% all the time. Yes. Yeah.
What about Beata? Was she present during this time?
So some of the time she wasn't. I would typically try to get there at 4, sometimes a little later. It always depended on Maya's schedule and what was going on. And sometimes Beata would get home. I don't really remember her schedule, so sometimes I'd catch her at the end. If I recall her norm, she'd come in with a few groceries or a little bit of stuff to put in the fridge, and she would basically initially talk about how things were going with the kids. Kyle, do you have your homework done? Maya, are you doing? She would try to not interrupt us, tutoring, but you never really hear her talk about work. I never really knew how her job was. She never came home in a negative attitude about her job, and it was usually, how are the kids doing? I think because I was there, she would touch in with Kyle. Kyle, how you doing? Do you have any homework? What are you doing? And then come over and see how Maya's doing. Try to touch base with me because I talked to Jack a lot about how she was doing academically, just because I was there with him the most. And she'd always try to get the, how is she doing compared to the other kids? What's going on? You know, she would always do a touch base. Very, she's a Polish girl, so she was a little bit more matter of fact. Just that demeanor she always had.
And over the course of the fall, did you, as you saw Maya with her eyes sunken in, did you become aware that they were going to take her to Mexico for this ketamine treatment?
At sometime around that path, Maya and Beata had told us about this blog from a girl called Jessica's Journey. And so I shared it with the parents in my classroom. And
Your Honor, objection, hearsay.
Listening.
All right, I'll just focus you back.
Okay.
You're fine. I'll just focus you back to whether or not you became aware that she was going to travel to Mexico to receive some ketamine treatment.
yes.
And I imagine there was an interruption in your tutoring of Maya while she was out of the country.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then at some point, either in December or January, your tutoring with Maya resumed?
Yes. As
And-
soon as she got back and was feeling ready.
All right. And again, back in her home.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How did she look after the ketamine treatment in Mexico?
She looked tired, but she didn't look so. She looked like she had a little bit more strength. She wasn't bedridden. She was in the wheelchair. And progressively, within a month, seemed like she was in October.
So-
So she had strength back, but still in a wheelchair.
And so if you compare her physical condition before she left for Mexico and when she got back from Mexico, would you make that comparison for the jury, please?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, she just seemed strong again. I wasn't going back and tutoring in her bedroom, but she still was in a wheelchair. But she just she was glowing. Maya glowed. She was that little girl that glowed. She was glowing.
Would you have to lift her out of her wheelchair at times?
Still then, a little bit, because her legs were kind of inverted, but she was still, her legs, her arms, she could move the wheelchair, where previous to that I would sometimes have to push her, but at that point she had the strength in her upper body.
And you tutored her throughout the spring of 2016?
Yes.
That was the end of her 4th grade year.
Correct.
And did she maintain status quo? Did she progressively get better during that spring, or did she get worse during that spring?
No, she got better. She was never out of the wheelchair, but there were times where she could kind of scoot herself around places. No, it seemed to be she was getting better. They just had to figure out how to get her legs working again.
What about her academic performance during the second half of her 4th grade year?
Yeah, Maya was a brilliant kid. If she hadn't been home health bound in going through what she was, I definitely would have recommended her for gifted to be identified and tested, so she could have had the option of going to a magnet school at like Pineview if she wanted to. But there was just so much going on at home. I know that wasn't the concern of the parents. But oh yeah, she was very brilliant. She was one of my top students in a gifted classroom.
Did the Homebound program provide schooling over the summer of 2016?
You know, I didn't always just follow what the Homebound program did. If Maya had the need and she needed me to be there to teach her, I was there. So if Jack got a hold of me and Maya needed some help, I wasn't always confined to the dates of the Homebound program. It would just be what do you need? What does she need? Does she need a break from school? Does she want me to come? So I know the next school year, I started up with Maya again before the school year started. And I know we didn't have a Homebound contract at the time just because paperwork can take a lot of time. And I knew what Maya's needs were, so I started seeing her before school started. And Maya loved school, so she loved for me to come.
So outside of whatever the county was
Oh, yeah.
paying for,
Yeah.
you
yeah.
did this voluntarily?
Many times.
And saw her over the summer of 2016.
Yes, especially that August before the school year started, making sure she was ready, seeing how she was.
And if I could ask you to draw a comparison again between how she's doing in August of 2016, she's now getting ready to start 5th grade.
Right.
How was she doing getting ready to start 5th grade compared to spring of 4th grade?
Right. Strong, still in the wheelchair, looked good, really bubbly, just couldn't, walk. But her demeanor, her arms, her body strength, everything was still like we were just waiting for something to happen. But yeah, positive, bubbly, excited. You always try to give them hope, so you're thinking, maybe you'll be able to Skype, maybe you'll be able to come to the school again, like in 4th grade. We didn't really know when it would turn.
And over this 9-month period, January 2016 to September 2016, you were aware that she was getting periodic ketamine treatments.
Right.
And you tutored her almost every week.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And did you ever notice any negative effects from the ketamine treatments that affected her academic performance or ability to do her schoolwork?
No. A few times she seemed tired, but it never affected her ability. She was a super bright kid.
And then we get to her admission to Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital beginning of October 2016. By that point, you'd already started the regular school year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you were again going to her home.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see a kind of a rapid decline just before she went into the hospital there?
Yeah, I think that last week before she went, we didn't even go see her. I think Jack or Beata might have texted us, or myself, and said, Maya's having a really tough day. So once or twice, and then all of a sudden we got the text, I believe, from Jack that they'd taken her to the hospital.
And do you recall some confusion or some back and forth over whether she'd be allowed to have the Homebound program in that 5th grade year? Can I show you an email?
Yeah.
Your Honor, if we could publish 2408-1675, which has been admitted.
You may.
Take a moment, if you wouldn't mind, just read it to yourself.
Right. Yeah, so that's September. Mm-hmm.
So this is you writing to Beata and Jack?
Right.
And if you could just, I'm sure the jury's had a chance to read it as well, but if you could just summarize what was going on in the background here with the Home Healthbound program for Maya.
So just, the school year started. Maybe we would have been in about 3 weeks according to that date, and that the official paperwork had come that that they would allow Maya to be home healthbound. But I had already seen her previous to that, so this was just kind of making it official of would Monday and Thursdays work, and Mrs. Shepler and I would be rotating back and forth. But I do remember, I'm just recalling this, that at one point Jack said, even if the school system doesn't approve it, I'll just pay you. And
Sorry.
he didn't need to do that.
So Jack offered to pay you.
Yeah.
All right, we can take that down. Did you have any contact with any of Maya's physicians during this 2016 period before Johns Hopkins?
No. I'd only known that her primary care physician was Dr. Wassenaar, a really well-known pediatrician in Venice. Being a teacher since 1990, you know of a lot of pediatricians. I have 4 children myself, so I was keenly aware of great pediatricians in town. And parents will talk to you about them, so I knew that she was in good care. I knew that he had sent her, or they had found a specialist, and so I knew that they were seeing a specialist, but I hadn't had contact with either of those, primary care or specialist.
But you knew of her pediatrician.
Oh, yeah. Everybody knew of Dr. Wassenaar.
And so you mentioned a few minutes ago that Mr. Kowalski texted you and said that she'd been admitted to Johns Hopkins.
Right.
And then at some point after that, did you learn that she wasn't coming home in the near future?
No, I think it took me a while to figure that out. When I first started going up there, I didn't know that she wouldn't be coming home for a while. I felt like I was going up there a few weeks, and I just thought she'd be released any day. I think it probably took a month before any word had gotten to me, if I recall, that the hospital had kind of taken over her care. I was just going up there as like her teacher and continuing to do home healthbound.
Did you come to learn what the allegations were against Beata?
Yes, I believe Jack might have texted me and said what had happened.
Mr. Wood, hold on a second. I don't understand what you're saying, Mr. Anderson.
I'm sorry.
I was trying to get the volume turned up a little bit, Judge. I was having time.
The volume is
Okay.
at the highest level it can get.
I'm sorry. I have a very soft voice. I'll get closer. Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't understand those hand signals.
Trying not to interrupt. Secret language.
I'd like to show the witness Joint Exhibit 1073-65.
You may.
Thank you. Do you recognize this?
Yes, so that's an IEP. It's an individual education plan. I do a lot of these every year for gifted kids. Hers was unique. It was really the start of Sarasota County allowing a camera to be put in the schools. Of course, this was pre-COVID, so there was a lot of scare about allowing that to be happening in a classroom, a camera to be in the classroom videotaping, and a student to be Skyping with us. So it took a long time for our IT person to get this allowed.
And if we look at the bottom of that first page, I see your name and your signature, and then above that, I think I see Ms. Kowalski's name. You see that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So she was involved in this process.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And was she supportive or unsupportive of her daughter receiving some schooling?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, the more she could get, the better. I think they were a little sad that they only got allocated 3 hours a week.
She wanted more.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if you'll take us to page 69, please. And the bottom there, the meeting minutes, it says Taylor Ranch will allow supplemental instruction such as Skyping into the classroom for reading and math instruction.
Correct.
What was the plan there for Skyping?
So this was this the beginning of her 5th grade year?
Yes.
And so we were going to try to do it. So we were like allocated 4 hours a week, but we really needed like 4 hours a day because I teach math and science 2 hours every day, and Mrs. Shepler teaches reading language arts an hour and a half. So she would start in the morning, and she would start with Maya, and Maya would be in my classroom, and then my students would move into Mrs. Shepler's at 9:30. We have the same schedule now, and they would do reading language arts for an hour. But I do recall most of the time Maya couldn't make it back in the afternoon for my science instruction because she was tired or she had doctor's appointments. So she would basically be online with us from like 8:30 to 11:30 every morning. And then our kids would go to lunch. And then by the afternoon, most of the time she wouldn't make it back. So I am reading that it says 4 hours weekly, but we try to do it every day.
But the school district was willing to support remote education.
Yeah,
for
it was
Maya.
the first time ever. It was groundbreaking.
And you were more than willing to do
Oh,
it.
yeah. It was exciting. The kids would love to see her computer stroll in, and they could see her face.
And so after she was at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital in October, you mentioned you started being allowed to see her.
Right.
How was she doing in the first couple weeks?
Yeah, she was, she was happy to see me, that's for sure, just because it was a familiar face. I didn't think she would be there long because it didn't seem like she had been as bad as I'd seen her at her house. But then she got progressively sad because then Dad wasn't coming. It was just me. And then even when Jack was able to come, she really missed her mom. But academically, she was doing fantastic. She loved school. But pretty quickly, she wasn't as comfortable getting out of her bed and going around the hospital or going to the craft room or some of the things that we had done previously when I first started seeing her. Because she's a girly girl and she loves crafts, and she had crafts all over her room, and so I know she loved the craft room. And there was a piano in there, and she loved to play the piano. But I guess I might have seen her for about, what was that, maybe 10 weeks, about 3 months maybe? And about halfway through, she really didn't go to the craft room much anymore after that.
Was that because she was in more pain or doing worse, or what
Yes.
was the reason?
She was in more pain, and she just laid in her bed a lot at that time. Instead of even sitting up, or just her disposition when I would get in there, or her position of her body. Towards the end, she was just laying down in her bed.
Well, let's talk about the process of getting into the hospital and getting access to Maya's room, and how you went about doing that each time. Was it social workers or nurses who would greet you at the hospital?
It was different every time. There didn't seem to be a pattern to it. I always have to check into the front desk. And in the very beginning, they would always call like a social worker. And they would come down and meet me and guide me up. After a while, I believe the place I signed was very odd too. One time I signed like the clergy. There wasn't really a designated place maybe for me to sign. So that changed a lot. So I didn't always log in at the same place. And then after a while, I think they would call up. I always had to wear my teacher badge. And then they would say you could let her in. But her rooms changed quite a bit. So sometimes the social worker would come and guide me up to where her new room was.
Was the reception that you got warm or cold or indifferent?
It was a little indifferent, like, who are you and why are you here to see her? So I just introduced myself right away. I'm Jackie Dieter, I'm her teacher. I kind of wanted to reiterate that I wasn't related to her because I was assuming that there was something written in the file of people not being able to see her. And so that, I think, helped. And then they led me to her room. But no, there was never a, oh, hey, Jackie, so glad you're here to, teach Maya today. She really needs, somebody to see her. Never that reception. Very cold.
And what about the interactions you observed between Maya and the nurses that went in and out as you were tutoring? Cold, warm, indifferent?
Indifferent. Sometimes cold. Very disconnected. Very impersonal.
Did they seem like pediatric nurses and social workers who cared about this little girl, or didn't care?
Objection.
Legal basis.
The legal basis is with respect. They're asking a teacher to comment on the care and treatment provided by nursing staff.
We'll just kind of keep it to the legal basis. So
But the legal, outside the scope of this witness's testimony.
that objection I'll overrule.
So, as a teacher, I think about teachers, and a lot of people went to college to be teachers, and they don't know how to teach. And then there's teachers that go to school to be a teacher, and they're really good at it, like it was their gift, and they're natural. And then there's teachers that care about their kids. And it's not just about teaching, it's also about teaching and caring. And so I guess if I was a teacher and had to relate to nursing, I would think there are nurses and they go to school to be nurses and they're good at their job.
Objection. It is a narrative. It's non-responsive to the question.
I will sustain the narrative portion at this point. Why don't you ask your next question, Mr. Wood?
Yes, Your Honor. Are there any particular interactions with a nurse or a nutritionist or a social worker that you recall?
So a few times I had interaction with a nutritionist who came in at the time that Maya was having to order her meal for the next time. And it was obvious at this point they were getting very frustrated in Maya because she kept ordering the same type of food. And even at one time, I looked at the menu and kind of went through the menu options with Maya to try to choose some other things. She liked the spaghetti noodles, but she didn't like sauce on it. She liked the jello or the pudding. She always had to have some type of dessert. And sometimes I don't remember the third thing or the vegetable, but it was one thing, and it was like she ordered that same meal a lot. One time a nutritionist was very abrupt and quite not kind and said, Maya, you need to eat healthier. You need to eat, a more well-rounded dinner. And that, I believe, was the time that then I went through the menu with Maya and was trying to tell her, let's try to pick some things. I really initially thought, well, she's eating a lot of carbs. She needs some weight, so it's probably good she's loading up on pasta. Not that I'm a nutritionist. And then she turned to me and got a little teary-eyed and said, I really miss my mom's cooking. Nurses came in all the time, took vitals, didn't say hello, didn't introduce themselves to me, didn't want to know who I was, took the vitals and left.
Again, it's not responsive to the question.
Sustained. Let's try to just answer the question
Well,
that's asked.
he just asked what my interaction.
You're right,
okay.
you're right.
Okay.
You mentioned a few minutes ago, early on in her stay, her room was filled with crafts.
Mm-hmm.
What about her doorway, outside her door?
No, I don't ever remember her doorway. A few times I don't think there was a name on her door because we would go into... I recall 3 different rooms. I could be wrong. And I remember one time I went into one, I think it was the last room I remember, and there wasn't a name on it, and I thought we were going into the wrong room. So no, there was nothing that said, oh, this is Maya's room.
Other than you, who else do you know of that was allowed to visit during this first 4 or 5 weeks at the hospital?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
She can answer if she knows.
If she knows.
So my teammate, my teammate, Diane Shepler.
Maybe ask a question.
Do you know?
Oh, yes.
Why don't you try to lay a foundation?
Okay.
Do you know who else was allowed to see Maya during the first 4 or 5 weeks of her stay at Johns Hopkins Children's Hospital?
Diane Shepler was only able to go maybe the first week.
What about her father? Do you know if he was allowed to go?
No, he couldn't go.
So, you were the only point of contact?
Yes.
Okay. What kind of tension did that create for you as the point of contact for Maya with Beata and Jack as the parents?
I think at first they were super thrilled that somebody could go. And I would go by the house and pick up cards and teddy bears and nail polish. So I think they were just excited Maya would get to see somebody. And Maya was super excited when I'd walk in initially. And then later, I think it got harder when Jack also couldn't go. And I think when Maya was figuring this out, I knew she was so excited to see me, but I'm sure she wanted to see her mom and dad.
Were Jack and Beata hungry for information about their daughter?
Yes, very hungry. So basically when I would leave, because it was about an hour and 20-minute drive, I would call and I would just kind of give an update. And I was always trying to be super positive just because this is what parents need to hear. And I thought Maya would be home any day now. So almost every day I left, on my drive home, I would call and just give them an update of fingernail polish, teddy bears. Once or twice Maya liked to do selfies, so she took selfies of us in the hospital room. And yeah, they were super hungry to hear how she was doing.
How did Beata react to this information?
She was relieved that like I could tell her about Maya, and that Maya seemed really happy, or I painted her nails. It just felt like relief, like she had kind of been connected to Maya, just by me being there and me talking about Maya and what our day was like that time. It really seemed like relief. And I'm sure with Jack, the same. I don't know if they had me, I think they had me on the speakerphone a few times, and a few times I think I was just talking to Beata. And then I don't recall how much longer than Jack could finally go. So then the phone calls were almost just with Beata, because she could hear from Jack how Maya was doing.
And over the 3 months that Maya was there, did you continue to provide updates to Beata, or did that become difficult?
Yeah, it became too difficult.
Can you explain a little bit to the jury?
Maya was just really desperate to see her. And I just think when I would talk about school and what we did, or if I took her to the craft room, or there was a fall festival one Saturday when I went up there. And I think I kind of knew Jack was seeing her, so Jack was able to give her the head, because she was really sad. She'd cry. She was desperate when I would then call and talk about me taking Maya to the fall festival. It was too much, and she so desperately wanted to be the one to see Maya that I bet I probably called her for the first 6 weeks, but I think the last month it just became too hard for me to, and we would do little summaries. I would give Maya a little summary of what she was doing for homework each week and what we were working on, and I would like forward, I think, those to Beata, but yeah, that became too hard.
Too difficult to keep giving Beata updates.
Yes, because I was the one seeing her instead of her mom.
Let me show you what's been admitted as Exhibit 1001-2019. If we could publish that, Your Honor.
Yeah.
And if we could focus in, this looks like a October 23rd, 2016 social work note. And if we could focus in there on visit information, maybe just highlight that for the witness. You were, during this time, first of all, how far was the drive for you from your home or Taylor Ranch up to the hospital to see Maya?
It was about an hour and 20 minutes.
And so how often were you allowed or able to make that trip up to the hospital?
So when Mrs. Shepler couldn't go, she went maybe 2 or 3 times, and then for some reason they weren't allowing her in there. I filled both of our positions. I would try to go twice a week.
Twice a week?
Mm-hmm.
And were you aware as to whether or not Maya was receiving any other instruction, 5th grade teacher or anything like that?
So I don't know how long she'd been here at the time. Has she been there a month?
She'd been here 2 weeks or so at this point.
At this point. So it was at the beginning of October. So the few times that I'd gone at that point, and at that point I think Mrs. Shepler had gone once or twice, we couldn't figure out if she had any kind of teacher allocated to her from the hospital or that county. And so I couldn't get anybody to give me that information. So the social worker that would escort me couldn't provide me any of information on whether Maya was getting additional work to do. And so I had talked to the IT guy, Dave Chamberlain, Calamari, and he had worked out me bringing a computer up there and that we would Skype just like we had at school. And then when I got there with that computer, they said I couldn't leave it with her. So it was a laptop for her to be able to possibly Skype and do schoolwork with us. And then I had to take it home. I would bring my computer for us to do work with, but I couldn't leave her a laptop to Skype. And nobody ever, all that time they were there, nobody could ever tell me if there was ever anybody helping her.
And why? Fine. Why did that cause you so much concern and heartache?
Well, I knew I was the only person to see her. I don't know if at that point Jack could even see her. She was a bright girl. She really needed academics. No matter what was going on with her medically, she loved school. This is a kid that could have done 8 hours of school a day. So I thought, if this is what she's really good at and she likes, why wouldn't there be some program at the hospital or in the district that would give her somebody that maybe didn't have to drive an hour and a half and could only do it twice a week for 2 hours. So I just was really desperate for her to try to get some education and for her to not fall behind.
And this laptop, this was an effort to ensure that she had more than an hour and a half, 3 hours a week of education?
Yes.
And who at the hospital told you that the laptop could not be left with Maya?
I don't recall if it was the social worker that led me in or a nurse there. I don't recall what person, but I literally had to put it outside the door of her room.
What were there any specific programs that were on that computer that would have helped Maya?
So the program that I brought the first time on my computer when I first went to see her is a program called Success Maker. The kids in the county use it. Right now there's a new program that's replaced it. It levels kids where they're at academically. So for kids that are really bright, it's a really great program because if they're in a 5th grade class, they could be doing 6th and 7th grade work. So it's what they call an individualized instruction program. They're really popular throughout the country. And so it's a program that would have allowed her to work on math or reading at her level based on literally her responses to the problems. Those are very well-known computer programs. The first time I went with my computer, they actually didn't let me go in with it because they said she couldn't have access to email. And I just said, well, find out for me who I can talk to, social worker, DCF, who I could talk to that would help me bring it in so that under the time I'm here with her, I will be able to have her just do this program with me and ensure that she's not on email.
Did they ever get an answer back to you?
No, just the next time I went, I brought my computer.
Did they seem, as the nurses and social workers, concerned that this little girl was only getting 3 hours of education a week?
Objection on the speculation.
Yeah, sustain the question is free.
What was their attitude about Maya getting more instruction other than the hour and a half or 3 hours you were able to get up there?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Overruled. You can answer that.
So my take on it as her teacher was, I didn't understand why, as the person that came to see her twice a week, there wasn't contact or communication with me at answering any of that. Even to tell me, no, there's nothing here at this hospital that we do for her, or no, there's nobody in the county that can come and see her who's closer. So over that whole time, nobody ever contacted me about any kind of academic program for Maya.
In the times that you were there at the hospital, did you ever see them doing anything therapeutic for Maya? Occupational therapy, physical therapy, psychological therapy?
No, I didn't see any of that.
When you're seeing her very limited time, what was Maya's attitude towards schoolwork versus anything else?
She loved schoolwork, loved it. She might have loved crafts a little bit more than that, but she did love schoolwork. So when I would be there, she would be very excited to do school. She also would want to talk for a few minutes because her first, seeing me, I always knew we weren't going to do schoolwork right away. It would be, what did she do, or what was her day like, or did she meet any kids at the craft room? So she was social. She really liked to tell me about how things were going because she didn't really have anybody to tell that to every day. But no, she liked getting into school. She liked knowing, where are the kids at? Are they doing? How did they do on this? How did I do? So she liked to learn.
what was your observation about Maya's interaction with the nurses and social workers? How did Maya react when they entered the room?
This is objection again. Same with speculation. It's also been asked to answer.
Yeah, overall, you can answer.
She was frustrated when the nutritionist came in because I think she knew that she wouldn't be happy. The nurses that came in and took her vitals, there was no connection to very much at all. It was very disassociated and impersonal, and every once in a while when I would go there, she would say whatever we were talking about, because the nurses kind of came in.
Hearsay, Your Honor.
Sustained as to Hardy position.
Whenever,
I'll have to re-ask the question.
oh, okay.
Would Maya ever express to you any suspicions about the hospital?
This is objection to hearsay.
Sustained.
Do you recall any spontaneous statements that Maya made to you about hospital's treatment of her?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
I'm going to move on. I probably got you in trouble, so
Okay.
I'm going to move on.
I don't feel in trouble.
Okay, good. What about, did Maya appear to you to be in pain as it progressed from November to December?
She would verbalize that she was in pain. She would tell me. She would initially say it, and then we'd get to our business talking, or sometimes she had me paint her fingernails or braid her hair. And then we would do school, and she would kind of just be quiet the whole time, and randomly a nurse would come in and she'd tell them, I'm in pain. Where sometimes when she would tell me that, I would say, when the nurse comes in, tell them that, because I can't do anything about it. Or I would just try to comfort her verbally.
And when you observed her telling the nurses this, was their reaction one of concern or one of indifference? What was the reaction?
Mostly indifference.
How was she doing, other than the pain she was expressing, how was she doing physically as the time went on in the hospital?
So as the time went on in the hospital, she looked like she did when I had seen her the year before. The progression was very similar, from outgoing and bubbly at the kitchen table, and she would sit up in bed, or we'd get in the wheelchair and go down the hall, to then she didn't want to get out of the bed. Her legs and feet had gone in again. And she would just lean back and was kind of surrounded by pillows. So I definitely saw her following exactly what happened the previous year.
This all ended in January of 2017.
Right.
At December of 2016, did you have any contact with Beata about how Maya was doing?
I don't recall that I ever could tell her, Maya looks awful again, because I think that would have broken her heart. And I think because I knew Jack was able to relay what Maya looked like in bed, I figured he would be the one that could have told her how Maya was doing.
In this third month of her admission, how did you feel going to visit Maya as she was getting worse and you didn't feel comfortable telling Beata?
So it was feeling kind of desperate at that time, because now I feared she wasn't getting out. This was going on too long and something more serious was going on. She was looking worse, like right before they went to Mexico. So I kind of had hope in a weird way. I thought whatever treatments the hospital could give her, because how it had been described to me previous was
Objection to hearsay, Your Honor.
Sustained. next question is.
Let me just re-ask the question.
Okay.
How did you feel being in this position where you felt uncomfortable relaying what you were observing to Beata and seeing Maya deteriorate?
Just, Judge, could give objection on the relevance.
I'm going to overrule the relevance. She can answer that question.
It felt very difficult to not tell Beata because Maya looked really bad. It reminded me of what she looked like the year before. And because Jack could see her, I just assumed Jack was telling her. It's a very difficult thing for me to not communicate that to Beata.
How did you learn what happened with Beata on January 8th, 2017?
Jack texted me on my phone.
Did you attend the funeral?
Yes. There were a few celebrations of life.
And then when Maya came home, did you resume tutoring again?
Yes.
So you'd seen her, of course you'd seen her over these months in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
You'd also seen her outside of the hospital before she went in.
Right.
And you saw her when she came out of the hospital.
Correct.
Was she better or worse? And if you could describe to the jury, how so?
After the hospital?
After the hospital.
Of course, she was super depressed or sad because she lost her mom. I think just like a breath of fresh air emotionally and mentally because she had Kyle and her dad. Still seemed really weak. Initially, was super weak at the funeral. Looked tired. Then it took a while. Maybe till April or May that she looked like she had strength again. She attended the graduation at school. And I think by then she was doing the wheelchair again. That was always a good indicator for me if her upper body was strong. And we had given her a Taylor Award, and so she was recognized at the graduation, and she seemed happy again.
Were Beata's concerns that Maya wasn't going to make it in the hospital justified from your
Objection,
perspective?
Your Honor, on speculation.
Sustained.
Were there times that you thought Maya wasn't going to make it in the hospital in late December, early January?
Objection again, it calls for a medical opinion.
Yeah, overrule that.
She looked like she did the year before, right before she went to Mexico. So she looked sunken in eyes, gray skin, she'd lost weight. She was definitely not getting better. And yes, if I had been a mom, I would have most definitely thought, this girl's not going to make it.
And as you finished out her 5th grade year now,
Mm-hmm.
was she determined to get better?
Maya was always determined to get better. She was a little feisty fighter. She was not going to let this break her, and she wasn't going to let a wheelchair limit her. She was always a fighter. So yeah, she was going to fight.
Was she like her mom in that way?
Yes. She was a lot like her mom in that way.
Your witness.
Juror.
Good afternoon. Let me, Clay, maybe if you can put up the exhibit 2516001.
Is this an evidence?
Yes, this is an evidence. And I'll publish this to the jury. It's already in evidence. At the start of the email, Ms. Dietert, it says that the county has changed their stance to allow Maya to be home health bound this year. Do you remember the circumstances where the county first said Maya couldn't do homebound and then switched it?
I do not, but I just know when the school year started, they weren't going to allow it. I don't know what determines why a student could be home health bound.
So let me ask this. Were you aware of any psychiatric crisis that Maya suffered prior to this that led to a relapse?
No, I was not aware of anything like that.
Okay, so let me ask you about, and Clay, if you'll put up Joint Exhibit 107364. And just the part where it says primary disability hospital / homebound.
Okay.
Let me just make sure that we understand that this is the highest level of disability in the school district. Is that right?
Yes.
Meaning there's different levels of independence from a student being allowed to come into the class, and this one is so restrictive that the child's going to be determined that they're not leaving the house. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay. And we saw your signature earlier. I don't need to show it, but you participated in this consultation and decision?
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask you next about Joint Exhibit, which is in evidence 1073/76. Actually, let's do 75 first, please. The decision to homebound a student is based on a medical referral. Is that correct?
Yes, the homebound is.
Okay. If you'll scroll a little lower, please. Some of the questions on this, for example, number 7, could the student attend school with accommodation and, thank you, it's blurry, but it says, could the student attend school with accommodations, example, second set of books at home or use of a wheelchair? On Maya's form, that was checked no by her doctor. Is that right?
Yes, that's what this form says.
And then the next one below asks if there could be an accommodation. It says, could the student attend school regularly and receive homebound or hospitalization services on an intermittent basis? And that's also checked no.
I see that, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next question is the one I wanted to ask you about. Is the student, in this case Maya, confined to a home or hospital full-time, homebound or hospitalized? Are those services recommended? And that's what Maya was recommended for, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so at least as of August 2016, before Maya went to All Children's, the school district, on a form that you helped complete and sign, were making the representation that Maya was going to be in the most restrictive learning element for this year, meaning she was too sick to even leave the home. True?
Objection.
Legal basis?
Misstates the evidence.
Overruled.
I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
Sure. According to the classifications for the Sarasota County classifications for homebound, based on the forms that you participated in and based on the medical review, as of August 2016, the school board determined, based on the medical information, that Maya was unable to leave the home at all to come to school and participate. Is that true?
Yes, that's what this form says.
Joint Exhibit 107376, this is the next exhibit. This is from, I think you mentioned Dr. Wassenauer. You're familiar with him?
Right, yes.
There was a question about whether the student, in this case Maya, was taking medication. Is this part of the forms that you guys review?
Yes.
Okay. And the answer is multiple medications in a way that may sometime affect the patient's cognition and ability to focus. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you know which medications Maya was taking in August of 2016 that would have caused that statement from Dr. Wassenaar?
I do not know which he was talking about on this. It's not listed, but I do believe at that time she was taking ketamine.
Okay. And from what you recall, the ketamine would have been one of the drugs that may have affected her cognition?
It didn't seem to affect her cognition.
Let me ask you about, if you scroll up, or it's there on the form, the starting date for this form is August 22nd, 2016. Do you see that? And this would have been the medical, well, let me just back up, just so the jury understands. A medical referral is necessary from a doctor before the school will put a student on homebound, correct?
Correct.
And this is the form that the school district would rely on, this one from Dr. Wassenaar?
Correct.
Okay, so on August 22nd, 2016, Dr. Wassenaar, on behalf of Maya, is representing to the school district on the form that you guys rely on, that she is too sick to leave the home for education. Is that how I understand this?
Yes, it looks like that's what it's saying.
And this would be approximately 10 days after, well, I'll let the record reflect, this is 10 days after the video that the court had seen published to the jury earlier of Maya in the pool. So let me ask you about the next form, which is the 107374. And again, this would be the prescription from Dr. Wassenaar that says that Maya is confined full-time to her home, that you would rely on. Is that right?
Yes, that's what it says.
Okay. Do you, and if you don't, that's okay. Do you have a frame of mind of how Maya was doing, for example, in August or September or October before she went into All Children's Hospital?
Similar to the spring the year before. Was still in a wheelchair, couldn't walk. Good upper body strength. Very positive disposition.
Okay. So let me ask you, and you may know, I can show you the documents, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. Maya was also on Homebound, so this is the 5th grade year, correct?
Correct.
And it's just so that we have, dates are flying over the place. Maya was obviously at All Children's per the DCF order from October 2016 through January 2017. That would be the 5th grade year.
Right.
And you were her exceptional learning teacher for that period of time?
Yes.
And you were also, for the 4th grade year, you were also her teacher as well?
Yes.
And so you were helping her with homebound learning in 4th grade?
Correct.
And then that continued in 5th grade?
Correct.
Okay. Once you were allowed visitation through DCF at All Children's Hospital?
Yes.
Correct? Did you have to undergo a background check through them, or was that already cleared because you're a teacher? Do you know?
I think it must have been already cleared because I was a teacher.
Okay. Not trying to trick you on dates, I promise. It looks like you were able to see Maya fairly early in her hospitalization.
Yes.
One of the first visitors allowed.
Yes.
Were you ever denied access when you went up to All Children's to visit Maya?
No.
Okay. The jury heard about a time when there was a laptop that you asked whether she could be left with, and at least according to the record, or maybe in your memory, you remember the nurse saying it has to be left outside.
Right, and then I couldn't leave it with her.
Okay. Do you know whether that was pursuant to a DCF rule or a court order? Do you know?
They did not tell me of anything like that.
Okay. So at least as of today, you don't know whether laptop restrictions were ordered by the court or ordered by DCF?
Yes, I was not aware
Okay.
that would happen.
To the best of your recollection, did you came twice a week while she was in the hospital?
Yes.
Okay. At least according to the records, well, let me show you joint exhibit. I'll show you one. It would be joint exhibit 1073227, which has been admitted into evidence. Clay. And if we could publish that to the jury. Are these the sheets that you sign off on when you visit Maya?
These are the sheets that we do. Yeah.
And I just wanted to ask you, it looks like you bring back the sheets to Beata for her to sign off on afterwards?
Right.
Okay. And just for example, on the 24th of October, this would signify, I mean, the jury knows that Maya's at All Children's per a shelter order, but this would signify that you went to All Children's, for example, on the 24th.
Correct.
And you spent, it looks like 2.5 hours with Maya.
Yes, it would typically be about that time frame. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, and there's, all of the records seem to show that, just so we don't have to go through each one, but to the best of your recollection, you were going up to All Children's about twice a week for 2.5 hours per session.
In the very beginning, Mrs. Shepler went.
Okay.
And then when she wasn't going, I took both of our places.
Understood. Do you ever recall having to cut a lesson plan short?
I don't really recall that. I typically recall trying to stay there longer than this paperwork would even share, just because I tried to get as much in as I could.
Sure.
And sometimes it wasn't, sometimes 15, 20 minutes would be us catching up and chatting.
Gotcha.
So, at the hospital, that could have happened towards the end when she would be tired.
Okay. At least according to the records, each one shows that you spent at least 2.5 hours with her. Is that consistent with what you generally recall? Or maybe more?
Well, 30 minutes of this was planning before I would go, and then 2 hours tutoring. But yeah, I would basically always spend 2 hours with her.
Okay.
And the days weren't always, like I would sometimes go on a Saturday.
Mm-hmm. You talked earlier on about some frustration about Maya, in your belief, wanting, or maybe you thought she needed a little more education. Did you ever reach out to DCF and ask them if she could have more educational visitors at the hospital?
I don't believe I reached out to DCF. I guess I didn't know that that's the line I would have gone. I thought approaching the hospital would be how I would find that out.
Okay. But at least from what you recall, you didn't reach out to either the court or DCF and ask them if they could allow more educational opportunity?
I did not.
Okay. After Maya was released from the hospital, you continued to tutor her at her house?
Correct.
Okay. Let me ask you, this is also a joint exhibit that's been received in evidence, 1074003. This, on the right side, would be her school grades, Maya's. And again, the year would be 2016 through 2017. Would you be the teacher providing the language art and math grade?
Language arts would have been Mrs. Shepler, and math would have been myself.
Okay. And this calendar school year, for the period which Maya was sheltered at the hospital, she still got straight A's?
Yes.
Okay. If you'll go to 1074004, the next page. And on the left side is the 2017-2018 school year. Let me just ask you, did you remain in touch with Maya after she went to middle school?
Mostly through her father on what was going on and how she was doing.
Mm-hmm. Were you aware that Maya got straight A's the next year?
I was not aware.
Okay. Were you aware that Maya was back in school physically the next year after she left All Children's Hospital?
I had heard that she was at Venice Middle, yeah.
Okay. And just if you can help me interpret this, the next year after Maya left All Children's for the next school year, does this report card show at the bottom the numbers of days she was in school versus the number of days she's absent?
Yes, it does.
And what does it show for the next academic year after she was released from the hospital in terms of her being absent or in school?
That she was absent 4 days.
Okay. Do you know how Maya's doing now academically?
I'm assuming she's doing amazing.
Yeah.
But I haven't reached out to her high school teachers.
Okay.
whom I know maybe.
Just one moment, Your Honor. I don't have any more questions for you. Thank you for your time today.
Mr. Whitney?
Okay.
May I do redirect, Your Honor?
Mr. Whitney started this witness.
At no point while Maya was on these ketamine treatments did her performance waver. Is that right?
Correct.
Were you aware of her attitude or of going to school in a wheelchair?
She didn't mind being in a wheelchair. She was excited to be at school. I'm assuming that's how it was in middle school too, but in my classroom, she didn't mind that.
You know Dr. Wassenaar. You know of Dr.
I know
Wassenaar.
of him, yes.
And you were just presented a form where he answered a questionnaire.
Correct.
And there was some mention on that questionnaire that some medications may cause cognitive difficulties.
Correct.
It didn't specify on that form what medications those would have been, did it?
No.
It didn't specify whether those were medications prescribed by Johns Hopkins Children's Hospital, did it?
No.
If it was ketamine, you interacted with that long, did you ever, there's a concern on that form that there might be some cognitive difficulties based on unspecified medications, but you were aware of the ketamine, right?
Correct.
Did you ever see any cognitive difficulties of Maya's during these ketamine treatments?
Never.
No further questions.
Anything else, Mr. Shapiro?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Members of the jury, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, ma'am, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members of the jury, I think this is a good time for us to take an afternoon break. Do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Do not do any investigation and receive no information. And we'll try to keep it to no more than 15 minutes. Before the jury leaves? Okay, hold on a second, members of the jury. Just hold on one second. Okay, so members of the jury, I'm glad the lawyers stopped me. Apparently, that's the last witness we have for today. So, let me go over a couple of... I saw that. Let me go over a few things for you so you understand where we're going to be next week. Monday is a religious holiday. The courthouse is closed. So we will not be here on Monday. We will be here on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday for witnesses next week. On Wednesday, there are matters that I need to deal with outside of your presence. So instead of bringing you in and then sending you to the room every 3 seconds, we're just not going to do that. So next week, you're going to be with us on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Now, following weeks, we probably won't go 3 days. You're probably going to be 4 to 5 days on future weeks. So this week, because of the upcoming religious holiday, is a day off for the courthouse employees. So we're not going to have court that day. I'm going to want you back at the rallying point at the exact same time that you arrived today. Okay? My rules apply now. Instead of just being overnight, it's a 3-day weekend for you. So please do not do any investigation, do not receive any information, and do no investigation. And remember, please do not read any media, review any media, or anything like that about this case. Okay? Have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you on Tuesday morning.
Thank you. All right, next thing.
Okay, the jury is out of our presence. Everyone, please be seated. Do we need to have a further discussion today about any issues, or are we going to break until 8:30 on Tuesday morning?
8:30 Tuesday.
Not on behalf of the defense.
I really want a list, a printout, either typed up or neat handwriting of the exhibits that are in, and then those that we're going to have issues with. And that way we can, hold on a second. Apparently one of the jurors had a question.
We can get it. I'll see if
See if you can. Okay. While we're figuring that out,
So, Judge, we filed the plaintiff's exhibit list with all our.
they were talking to each other, the
Oh,
deputies.
all right, okay to proceed?
Yes.
Okay. We filed in the court file all the plaintiff's exhibits with our objections listed on there. So I'm not quite sure what else the court wants. You want us to print that and bring it?
Well, I don't want, many pages. I want the exhibits, the numbers that you all can agree to, so that we can just announce them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay.
And then those that apparently you're going to need me to make a ruling on. So I'll have a sheet of paper that I can just say, let's look at this one, this one, this one, so we can try to do this more efficiently than we did today.
Your Honor, I think to clarify Ms. Crowell's concern, you're just referring to, I believe, the exhibits that are going to be used, for example, Tuesday with those witnesses.
That was my understanding of what you were trying to do.
Okay.
Yes, sir, I think
Okay.
she-
I thought you meant all of the exhibits. I was trying to understand. All right, thank you, Judge.
Okay. Can't find her? Okay. I think she's gone, so.
We could bring her back if the juror wants to keep the question, we can bring her back sometime Tuesday.
That seems.
Or ask them if it's a big deal. I don't know.
Do you want me to tell the jury that they can go, or?
Our paralegal, if you give her 3 minutes, she's calling her, and I bet she can get her back.
Look, why don't we just get,
Judge.
Only one at a time.
I suggest that we can bring her back sometime on Tuesday. I don't think that would be a big problem. If she's in the area, fine, but if not, I don't see the reason to have her turn around, drive back, and all this at this point. I think it's up to the court, obviously.
Judge, could we look at the question? Maybe it's not even one your court's going to give.
I think that's probably a good idea. And then ultimately, if we can't get her, then maybe some afternoon, because I suspect that she's working during the day, and try not to disrupt her. Can you call the Deputy Coley and ask the juror to write out the question if they haven't already done so, and then bring the question in? Okay, other issues that we need to deal with?
There's just a.
Deputy Demizio, can you close the door? Thank you.
Judge, is it possible at the end of the day, at the end of a couple of days, is somebody keeping track of the minutes being used? And would
I am
we-
keeping track of the minutes.
Can we have just an announcement so we know how we're doing in our tally?
I can, but I haven't tallied it for the last. So it's 35, it's 15. Okay, so I've got, for the plaintiffs, they've used 60 plus 40 plus 45 plus 1 hour. That's 2 hours. Is that 3 hours and 25 minutes?
For plaintiffs.
Because it's 60 and 60, that's 2 hours. 40 and 45, so that's so that's 3 hours and 25 minutes. The defense has used 5, and 15, so that's 30 minutes. So we consumed just under 4 hours of trial time today with witnesses, so 3 hours, 25 minutes, and 30 minutes.
Thank you, Judge.
Yeah, I intend on doing it every day. I just hadn't physically added them up. Here's the questions, plural. I guess it's okay to just read them out since the jury's not here. Question number 1, how did you keep her upright without support? Or actually, it starts off with, you mentioned sitting her up on a bar stool. How did you keep her upright without support? That's question 1. Question 2 is, did you ever see Maya in a wheelchair with a strap or support upright? And then question 3, can you describe how you managed Maya's limited mobility? Did you ask for support? Did you lift her? So if you all want to look at the physical, anyone who wants to, they can. Okay, and apparently she's on her way back.
Oh, okay.
So,
Do we know which juror?
no, and I asked them not to put the juror number on it. Yes, Mr. Hunter.
While the witness reappears, may I step down the hall for a moment?
You may.
She's in the hallway.
She's in the hallway? Okay.
Or not.
Counsel, any objection to these questions?
Not particularly, Judge. I think the problem is specifics of when, but maybe the witness.
Yeah. Okay. So is the jury ready to come back? Y'all ready for the jury to come back? Yes. Let's bring in the witness and put her back on the witness stand. As soon as the witness is in, then we'll bring the jury in. And you thought you got to leave.
You're not in trouble.
No. The jury just had a couple questions. Okay. I'm going to, just to let you know, I'm going to ask you in front of the jury if you remember that you're still under oath. So just to give you a heads up, I'm going to do that. Let's bring in the jury. That's fine. Yeah, you can stand up.
Juror Zachary?
Okay, everyone please be seated. Welcome back, members of the jury. Want to confirm while you were away, believing you were on your holiday here, that you did not discuss this case amongst yourselves, you did no investigation and received no information. Is that all correct? Okay. And ma'am, you understand you are still under oath? Yes. Okay. Now, the jury had some questions, so I'm going to go ahead and read the questions and you can answer the jury. You mentioned sitting Maya up on a bar stool. How did you keep her upright without support?
So I'm sorry, their bar stools had like a back support. So when I would go to tutor her at her house, in their kitchen, I would put her up there and she would just sit.
Okay. Did you ever see Maya in a wheelchair with a strap or support or upright?
I don't recall that.
And can you describe how you managed Maya's limited mobility?
In the classroom or at her house or at the hospital?
Well, I don't really know.
So should I answer all three?
Yes, let's do it that way.
So in the classroom, one of her really good friends, Sophia, was in the class. So Sophia loved pushing her around. Sometimes I would push her to and from. She always stayed in her wheelchair. She never moved into a seat. At her house, same thing. Some of the time she would move herself when her upper body strength was good. And then I would just move her out of her wheelchair into the seat. And then at the hospital, it was hit and miss, but pretty similar. If she wanted to go to the craft room or someplace, I would lift her out of the bed and put her in her wheelchair, and we would go. Depending on her strength level, I would push her in the wheelchair, or she would roll it with her arms. And then we would get back, and I would put her back in her bed.
Okay. And you somewhat answered this, but did you ask for support to help lift her?
No, I'd done it so many times.
Okay.
For so long.
Mr. Whitney, do you have follow-up questions based on the jurors' questions?
Yes, sir, just very briefly.
Those questions didn't address the time period. So, at her house in the spring of 2016, how did you manage her mobility? Did you have to lift her out of her wheelchair, or did she do it herself?
No, in the spring of 2016, was that her?
After Mexico?
Yeah, no, she had arm strength at that time.
That's all I have.
Mr. Shapiro, anything further?
No, class dismissed.
Well, members of the jury, do you have any other questions? This is a speak now or forever hold your peace type of moment. Okay, seeing none. At this time, you are free to go. Thank you.
All right.
So this time, ma'am, you can go, and we meet at this time. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
For the juror, or for the attorneys, 8:30, unless there's anything else you need to talk about. Okay, I will see everybody at 8:30 on Tuesday.